Hi everyone, it's Emma here, and this week I'm answering the question, is it normal to get a cold before your period? So I think this is potentially one of the lesser known symptoms that can be associated with PMS, but it can happen, and I'm just going to talk through why it can happen and of course what we could maybe do to help minimise some of those symptoms. Um, so this phenomenon of a period cold is when these kind of cold and flu type symptoms tend to crop up around the time of our period or perhaps just in the days before our period is due. So sometimes this can include kind of blocked nose, sinus pain, but also just some other symptoms that we often associate with colds and flus. Headaches is the other one. And what I would say is, and as we talk through this, it's trying to differentiate whether or not this is related to your period or not. And this goes for a lot of symptoms as well. So I think one of the main clues is if it crops up around the same time each month. So that's why I often urge women to try and track their symptoms, and not just for a month or two, even two, but up for a good few months. And that can really help to differentiate whether or not these symptoms are cropping up as a result of hormones or if it is something else entirely. So yeah, as I say, if the symptoms seem to follow a similar pattern, then it can be a clue that it could be related to PMS. So what should you do if you feel that you're feeling a little bit run down around this time? So as I've said, you are wanting to try and differentiate if it might be hormones that are to blame, because remember, it is this time of the month that our estrogen levels drop off to give us our period, and unfortunately estrogen is normally very good at helping to maintain a lot of bodily functions. So we have estrogen receptors basically all over our bodies, including interacting with the immune system, digestion, skin, just to name a few. Mood is another one. So that's why we can have quite a varied number of symptoms relating to PMS and also menopause. But what happens is if our hormones are a little bit more off balance, then those symptoms can be a little bit more pronounced. So in cases of PMS, for example, estrogen dominance is quite often a symptom. An underlying hormonal balance, which then creates symptoms. So this estrogen dominance, these symptoms can then become heightened as estrogen then drops off to give us our period. So if we do suspect that the symptoms could be related to our hormones and definitely likely to be part of symptoms of our PMS, then that's where something like the Agnus Castus can come in to help manage those symptoms that we often associate with hormones. So as well as some of the symptoms we mentioned today, quite often it's those kind of heavy, painful periods, bloating, menstrual cramps, tender breasts, and kind of irritability in terms of those mood swings. So that would be the one to include there. Interestingly though, if we suspect it's not so much our hormones, if there is something else ongoing, perhaps we feel we need a little bit more nutrient support or just general immune support, that would be when our balanced mineral drink would come in instead. There's key nutrients in there such as your vitamin D, magnesium, zinc, all very good for just maintaining our general overall health, things like our mood, energy levels, but also our immune system needs these nutrients as well to function optimally. So it's interesting, why might we be more prone to a cold during your period? So there actually is some research that's, as I've mentioned, how important estrogen is for maintaining lots of functions, but there actually is some research to suggest that our immune cells genuinely can change throughout the course of the month. And actually in the first half of our cycle, when estrogen is highest, it's gently rising towards ovulation. This research is suggesting that certain immune cells, such as regulatory T cells, which are very important for keeping us well, these are actually at their highest during this first half of our cycle. However, in the second half of our cycle, when we know that estrogen drops off, Unfortunately, it also seems that some of our immune cells, such as these T cells, also drop off, and that could potentially make us more vulnerable to infection. So, as I say, it could just be down to hormones, but actually, if we have less T cells, we could actually be genuinely catching infections as well. So depending on your thoughts on whether it's just symptoms or if there is an underlying infection, that's where something like our Echinophore's throat spray could come in as well. So this is the throat spray, although there's the other products in the range, but I love this one because it just gets straight to the back of your throat. So many bacteria, bugs, bacteria and viruses actually target the back of the throat first, which is why we often feel a niggle in our throat, and from there they can get into the rest of the system. So that's where something like the throat spray can come in really handy, just to help stop them in their tracks. So it's interesting that you might feel these symptoms are worse during your period. So as I say, that could be a result of those lower levels of T cells that make us more vulnerable to infection, or it could be as a result of those hormones just causing havoc with a number of areas, down to those effects on estrogen receptors. Also, as I've said, and as we know, as estrogen drops, there can be a whole number of symptoms. So it might just be that we're feeling a little bit worse during this time, so other symptoms that we're prone to might become heightened. So finally, I just want to summarise by just clarifying when you should consider seeing a doctor. So as I said, if you track your symptoms, you might have an idea of what tends to trouble you and what your symptoms tend to look like month to month. So that technically is normal for you, but what I would say is not to put up with severe symptoms. We've mentioned options like Agnus Cassis to potentially help manage some of the symptoms of PMS, but if they are more severe, if your home and herbal remedies aren't helping or aren't doing enough for you, then it's time to go for your doctor. We shouldn't have to put up with very severe symptoms, and we shouldn't just convince ourselves that this is normal, this is the way it should be. I do find that with PMS and certain symptoms that enough is enough in some cases. So as much as we can, try our best with the home and herbal remedies. Sometimes we just might need a little bit further advice from the doctor, some hormone therapy, for example, just to help manage symptoms that are a little bit out of control.